Yeah, what's good, everybody? It's your boy Matthew Maley from MatthewMaley.com. Back at you with another video. It's kind of funny, I just recorded that video talking about how I haven't been playing any poker lately, and I apologize. And what do you know? I got a poker recap video to do. It's nothing big. It was just a little $20 tournament we played with some friends, but it was the first time I played any cards in so long. I figured I had to do a video. I was so excited to play, and I want to let y'all know how it went. So, played over at my boy Jesse's place. We had 8 people, just a standard $20 tournament. I was hoping we were going to get a $50 tournament going, but ended up people only wanted to play for 20. And there weren't, I mean, some of the players weren't that great, so I understand that. But I ended up doing a last longer bet, a $30 last longer bet with Jesse and Vin. So we still ended up playing for 50. But really, it started off, I mean, this is the first time I played but one time literally since the World Series. That's how off my game I've been. So it was really good to just get on the felt and get to play some cards, man. And surprisingly, my game was pretty on point. I was able to switch gears pretty well. Was going from pretty hardcore maniac, going to playing pretty tight. I actually started off playing pretty tight through the first couple rounds, just to kind of get my feet back in, my feet set. I felt like a baseball player who got, beamed in the head or something that hadn't played in a while. So I had to get back in that batter's box, establish my stance and get back to it. So I played pretty conservatively for the first couple rounds. Then started picking my spots a little bit. I identified a couple players at the table who really weren't very good and were very much the standard. I'm going to bet when I have something, I'm going to fold when I don't. So I was able to take quite a few pots off of them and pad my stack pretty well. Really, I only got unlucky in one hand where I had Jack 9, flop came out Jack 3 deuce rainbow. I made a bet at it, guy raised, I called, turn card bricked. I bet again, he went all in. At this point, I had about, I want to say 5,000 in chips and he had about $2 grand. So it did hurt me because I did call him. He had Jack 10. So I just got kind of cool deck there. It is what it is. So that one did hurt me a little bit, brought me back down. And at that point, we were down to 6 people and blinds were at 100, 200. So it ended up being a pretty decent sized pot and it did hurt me a little bit. But I was able to hold on, ended up playing, again, pretty solid. Wasn't making too many crazy calls. I was making some crazy raises in position or when certain players were in the pot. I was actually making some raises out of position or making some calls out of position when a couple people specifically were in the pot. And then I was firing at the flop no matter what came out. And I would say about 85% of the time it worked. A couple times I got re-raised and let the hand go. One time I actually got re-raised, I called, and then on the turn I made a big bet. I actually pushed all in and I was able to take the pot away. So I played off my read pretty well with that and how I felt regarding a couple of the players and a couple of the pots, and it worked out pretty well. I ended up, I didn't really get any huge monster hands, between 5-handed and getting down to heads up. Really, everybody else was making most of the moves. I made a couple hands, couple good re-raises, got jacks one time, and 3 people called pre-flop. I raised from there and got everybody to fold. Had another hand with ace 4 where I flopped an ace and bet everybody out. Had another hand with king 10 and flopped 2 pair, bet everybody out. So I was getting some decent hands that were actually connecting, but nothing was actually, I wasn't really getting paid off. Ended up getting down to heads up, Jesse and I, and Jesse had been cleaning people out pretty well. There were a couple pretty loose calls that were made from some all-ins, so people were really just giving Jesse their chips, and one call was with the Jack 9, one was with the Queen Jack, just a couple kind of crazy calls that ended up, getting Jesse pretty well stacked in chips. So everybody started off with 5 grand to start the tournament. We wanted to do a little bit deeper stack, which I enjoy. I'm there, planning on playing for as long as I can, so I want to get my $20 worth. So ended up with, everybody started with 5 grand. By the time we got the heads up, I had probably about 9 grand, and Jess had like 30. He was just crushing me. Yeah, he had to have at least had, shit, I might have even only had like 6 grand to be quite honest. And pretty quick into heads up. I ended up picking up King 9. It was probably 5-6 hands in, and we, did a little raise, takedown. No, it was probably about 10-15 hands in, but it was just raise. I'd raise my button, he'd fold. He'd raise his button, I'd fold. I raised, he'd call, I'd bet on the flop, he'd fold. It was just pretty standard heads up play, just kind of going back and forth. Ended up picking up King 9 suited. I made a bet. He raised. I didn't really feel he was very strong. I pushed all in because he'd been kind of playing that. He'd played back at me a few hands in a row, and so I didn't feel that he was very strong, so I ended up pushing all in. He called. He had pocket fives, which really that's about as good of a spot as I could have hoped for. I didn't expect he was going to call, and then when he said call, I figured I was behind. I figured he had an ace, so I figured it was probably 60-40. So the fact that it ended up 52-48 or 50-50 or whatever was pretty solid, and spiked a king on the flop, so it was the second card out right in the middle there, and ended up holding up, so I doubled up from there. So I doubled up. I probably had like 6,500 or so, because I doubled up to probably about 13 to 15 grand. But I was still obviously behind. He had anywhere from 25 to 27 grand, I would say, and was still pretty behind. Actually, I might have even been closer to 18. Actually, no, I'm sorry, I had about 18 grand. That's correct. I had 17 or 18 grand because I remember we colored up the chips and we changed over. But I felt the momentum shift, and I felt pretty solid about it. I honestly really think I'm a good heads-up player. I enjoy playing heads-up a lot. When we used to be able to play online, heads-up was what I did. I played no-limit heads-up, sit-and-goes. I ended up, at one point I played a few of the $500 ones. I would usually play either the 50 plus, I think it was 50 plus 5, or the 100. It's been a while since I played the 100. More recently I was playing the 50s. I was playing the 20s, and I was also playing like the 4-person ones where you had to win 2 heads-up matches essentially. But it was cool. I mean, I really think heads-up is pretty solid on my game. I would say I've played probably half as many of all my total hands of Texas Hold'em. Probably a third to, well, maybe, no, probably a quarter to a third has been heads-up, which is pretty good when you figure the numbers. When most people just play normal ring games, my numbers are pretty decent. So I feel good about it. Jesse actually asked if I wanted to chop, but the problem is with our tournaments, whenever we play home games, we never get to play them out. We always chop. So I actually really wanted to play it out, especially because I was so low in chips. I figured he probably wouldn't have given me much to chop anyway, so I might as well just try and take a stab at it, and then I doubled up and, whatever. So I ended up picking up ace-5 of hearts on the button. I raised. He re-raised me. I pushed all in, and he called with King 10 offsuit. So 60-40 essentially. I just need to, fade a king or a 10, and essentially no crazy straights, and I'll be good. And a flop came out, hit the king. So didn't improve, ended up dropping, getting second. It is what it is. I mean, honestly, those are the type of hands that are going to happen in heads up. I got unlucky. I made a good move. I made a good play. I made a good bet. Any ace heads up's pretty solid, so I did well. He just got lucky, and my 60% wasn't 60%. So it ended up being on the negative aspect of that. But it is what it is. There's honestly nothing I can do about that play. Sure, I could have mucked ace-5, but if you're not playing ace-5 pre-flop in a heads-up match, why are you playing poker? I mean, seriously. So I got unlucky. It is what it is. There was a big